Jimmy requires love philosophy. Time for my guest of the day to roll in.
94.3.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
My favorite author and friend is with me. Well, woe betide. Normally he rolls into studio with his beaming face, but unfortunately this is the way it is in self-isolation. And given that he's now a diplomat in old Blighty, he's sitting continents away. But wonderful to see you, Amish. How are you doing?
Hey, absolute pleasure to see you, my friend. I'm still beaming, though it's on, it's on a video camera. I'm beaming. My friend, it's been long, man. It's been damn long. I miss listening to your program every morning. I'm stuck here.
Well, that's a wonderful compliment. Now, I have to say this. Thank you very much for another absolutely unputdownable experience. Suheldev is just one of those beauties to come out of your stable. But let's start with what is the Immortal Writers Center. That's a never before. Please explain.
Hrishi, it is a never before in India. On that I admit. But it has been tried before in the West. So by authors like Wilbur Smith, by James Patterson, where they build up a writer center, they hire a team of writers so that they can come out with more stories. Now, and I've told you this before as well, one of my biggest fears in life is I will die before I finish all my stories because I already have too many ideas and I keep getting more and more ideas, so Lord Shiva doesn't stop his blessings. So, in fact, in London, I've got another idea, set in the modern day. Yeah. So, a kick-ass idea. I'm really excited about it. It has time travel and gaming, and set in the modern day, completely different genre. But the ideas that I already have, I have some 20-25 book series ideas, not books, book series. Like Shiva Trilogy, 3 books is one series. At the pace that I write, a year and a half to 2 years, I'll die before I finish all my story ideas, right? And I can't do that. I can't carry my stories to the cremation pyre. So this was a very simple idea suggested by my team members that how about if we start a writer center here? So we've hired writers. As of now, we have 4 published writers that we are working with. I'm a bit of a control freak, so my model is a little different from James Patterson's and Wilbur Smith's. I essentially make the story summary, which would be say 5,000, 10,000 word, kind of story summary, the entire arc, key characters, etc. And what is the research that should be read, which is then shared with the team. Then the team, either just one individual or the group will write the first draft, which could be say 60, 65,000 words. And then it comes to me and I make the second draft and finalize the manuscript. So essentially what I'm doing is in a way increasing my capacity, so I have as of now 5 projects running simultaneously. Books. Each book takes a year and a half to 2 years. That's the amount of time my books take. My books are, they're relatively long, 400, 500 pages. They have a lot of research. So it can't be churned out in 6 months. But if you have 5 books running simultaneously a year and a half to 2 years later, you can launch 5 books together. So that, spacing it out, I'll have a book coming out every 6 months. That's the idea. Essentially that I can get more books out. These are all my stories and it'll read like my book to you.
It does.
The story and the second draft and the finalization is mine. But we don't want to mislead the reader. So we make it very clear in the book that's an Immortal Writers Center.
Yeah.
The writers get a fixed pay. So even if I'm not happy with the final, manuscript and for whatever reason say it doesn't get released, that doesn't matter. The writers get a fixed pay. That's how the model works essentially. So we've just started it. This is the first of the Writers Center books. There are 3 more projects which are already on. Besides the 4th, which is the 4th book of the Ramchand series, which I'm working on myself. So the core books, only I will write. Shiva Trilogy, Ramchandra series, Mahabharat series, Lord Rudra, Lady Mohini series. But these other books will come through the Writers Center. And hopefully you'll see a book of mine once it becomes stable every 5-6 months.
Nice. Lovely. Amish Tripathi's talent knows no bounds, as is obvious, and we shall keep discovering more facets of the author up ahead. But make sure you enjoy some Avicii with Conrad Sewell. This one's called Taste the Feeling, only on 94.3 Radio 1 World, your station. I'm Hrishikesh. Sean Paul with Swedish singer-songwriter Tove Lo. That one's called Calling on Me. Amish, the author, is back. His legend of Suheldev, the king who saved India, is based on a king in 11th century India, who along with his army beat back the barbaric Turks, and because of him, India was invasion-free for a period of 160 years. Historical fact, the Battle of Behraich, in which Salar Makhsood, nephew of Mahmud of Ghazni, and his soldiers were defeated by Suheldev, it features prominently in the book. More conversation with Amish.
94.3.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
Did you start reading about the Battle of Bayreuth first, which is a documented event from history, or did you choose to research Mahmud of Ghazni first or Suheldev first? What was the starting point for the story?
The starting point for the story was actually a conversation. I discovered about King Suheldev in Goa at a seminar through Abhinav Prakash, who's a professor in Delhi University, and Sanjeev Sanyal, a friend of mine,
I know
the
Sanjeev.
principal economic advisor in the government and an author. And they told me about the story of King Suheldev. I was fascinated, and King Suheldev is from UP, the state my parents are from, and I hadn't heard of him. And in my opinion, probably one of the most consequential heroes that you've not heard of. I thought, look, this is something that has to be set right. I started, okay, let me start exploring this. And, history is written by the victors, right? So the ultimate victors were the Turks 150 years later. So the first text where he's written off is actually a Turkic text, Birate Masudi, which paints King Suheldev as a villain. Obviously, for them, he was a villain. But there were folk traditions which are very strong. So I researched that, and found a fascinating story. See, but the thing is this, I'm not a scholar, I'm a storyteller, right? So I don't claim for this to be a non-fiction scholarly work on King Suheldev. That should be done by the scholars. Perhaps Sanjeev Sanyal could do it, or another scholar. This is a story. It's like what Braveheart was to William Wallace. It obviously did not follow the actual story. You embellish it to make a story. So that's what I've done. It's a historical fiction story on a truly remarkable hero who we need to hear of, who we need to get inspired by, especially in today's day, when I think unity is more important than ever. We are facing attacks from a neighbor, and I'm a diplomat, so I will not name the neighbor, but we all know who that neighbor is. The pandemic also emerged from that neighbor only, and we must be united, because the message of King Suheldev is, if we are united, if we Indians are united, we are freaking undefeatable. The problem is we are usually divided. That's the problem with us.
I love how you describe battle scenes. It's so vivid. You actually paint a picture with words. How do you do it? The technicalities of large armies going up against each other, as well as the intricate details of one-on-one combat. There's always both, isn't it? I mean, likewise here, one-on-one combat as well as, large flanks and infantry, cavalry. Talk to me about that.
I am clearly not a warrior. I don't have the size to be a warrior. I'm a small man. and if I was a part of those battles, today's battles are honestly relatively more civilized, because guns, these things, you can get it over with, frankly, a lot quicker. Battles in those days were brutal, and someone like me would have been the first to be killed. Right. But I love reading on this subject. I don't know if it's a fascination for the macabre or, just fascination with wars. Like, I love going to historical places, seeing locations, trying to imagine how wars could have happened. What were the battles like? As you learn in battles, the land itself plays a role. Where you choose your battle plays a role. How you play to your strengths. It's fascinating exploring ancient and medieval battles. So I've explored ancient and medieval battles, not just of India, but all over the world. I love reading about it. So I guess all that knowledge is there somewhere in the back of the head. So, for example, the medieval tactic, the importance of reserves, when to bring in your reserve brigades, okay? This was one of the things that most successful armies captured very well. The Rajputs never had the concept of reserves. So despite being very brave, they lost many battles, because one of the biggest problems for Rajputs was, because if anyone was kept in reserve, he would take it as an insult. That you're saying that I'm not
man part of the playing 11.
You're saying that my commander is telling me I'm not man enough to fight. I have to stay in reserve. So Rajputs would normally, the entire army would just charge, and reserve management was one of the critical things in medieval warfare. I understood this from studying various battles. So gives you insights, gives you interesting insights.
So you're the kind of guy who would go to Hampi maybe and just sit amongst the ruins in one corner and imagine things in your head, have it play out or whatever.
I love it. Which is why I love writing so much, because I love that world, honestly, more than the actual world that we live in. And in many ways, that world is more real than this world for me.
Medieval warfare and battle strategy with Amish, the writer. More to come. I'm Hrishikesh, and here's Ava Max with Kings and Queens, only on 94.3 Radio 1. One World, your station. Rude by the reggae band simply called Magic. He is India's literary superstar and rock star Amish, and here he is with his latest novella, The Legend of Suheldev. History, culture, warfare, and spirituality. We get it all in a conversation with Amish.
94.3. This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
I like that Suheldev, the book talks of Indian Muslims. They have for long, mostly unfairly been questioned and doubted. Talk about that.
No, I think a key mistake our elite establishment historians made, so I would lay the blame more out there initially, is that they didn't call the British colonial Raj the Christian invasion. Then why do they call the Turkic colonial Raj the Muslim invasion?
Interesting.
Like somewhere in the back of the mind, you're told like they would have been Indian Muslims, which is not true. More practically, all Indian Muslims today are actually descendants of Hindus and Buddhists who were converted often forcibly, often at the point of a sword. Yes, in the initial years, because Islam first came to India and Kerala, initially it was all peaceful. But when the Turkic invasions happened, so that's what Indian Muslims are not Turks. We can do, gene testing to prove that. But frankly, do you even have to do gene testing? Just look at them. Do they look Turk?
Yeah.
Or do they look Arab? No, they don't. Right? And I think Bollywood movies, Indian movies have played a role in this miscommunication as well. It's a little bizarre that Mongol warriors are shown with what appears to us like Chinese features. But when they show Turkic warriors, like Alauddin Khilji, they'll put Ranveer Singh. Akbar, they'll put Hrithik Roshan. Again, somewhere in the back of the mind, they were Indians. No, man, to us, the Turks would have also looked Chinese because the Turks and Mongols were all from Central Asia, Eastern Asia. They were all Central Asian tribes. Turks weren't originally from Turkey. Turkey was actually Greece. The Turks conquered Turkey, ethnically cleansed the men. They wiped out all the men and took over the women. That's what they did out there. And over 1,000 years, things changed. So, there's this assumption that the Turkic colonial rule, which is what it was, the Delhi Sultans and the Mughals, was Indian Muslim rules. You read the list of nobles, there are no Indian Muslim names, almost none in there. They're largely foreigners, largely Turks, but also maybe some Arabs, some Persians, almost no Indian Muslims. We need to understand that. So that's one perspective, understanding that it was Turkic colonial rule, who were Muslims, yes, but who were not Indian Muslims. Secondly, they were brutal beyond measure. They were like ISIS times 10 million. The most brutal invasion in human history, according to Will Durant, an American historian, was the Turkic invasion of India. Millions, perhaps few hundred million Hindus, Buddhists, Jains were massacred. Thousands of temples were destroyed. Tens of universities were burned to the ground. So the establishment historians, what they've done is the worst of both worlds. They've called Turkic colonial rule the Islamic rule, so to tar Indian Muslims with it. And they're also trying to tell Hindus that no, nothing happened. Alauddin Khilji was a peaceful guy just playing the sitar. Aurangzeb was a wonderful man just singing ghazals. When we all know they were the most brutal buggers in human history. So, a Hindu, even a centrist Hindu like me would say, like, why do you have to defend Aurangzeb? I mean, it's like defending Hitler, man. Like, what's wrong with you? But at the same time, what does it have to do with Indian Muslims? So what the establishment historians have done is injected poison into India. They have hurt both Indian Muslims and Indian Hindus. We need to pull that poison out by realizing it was Turkic colonial rule and it was probably the most brutal invasion in human history. We need to speak of it honestly. Truth will set us free.
Strong women, Amish, have always been a part of your books, and Toshani is one such character. I love that character. It must be close to your heart too. Let's talk about her.
One of the things in Indian tradition which has been forgotten again in the last few centuries is in our ancient way, men and women were treated as equal. We had the equivalent of women prophets and messiahs in ancient India. I've told you this before. I've said often in the Vedas had names written by Hrishikesh. Show me another culture which had women prophets and messiahs. We're the last surviving goddess worshipping culture in the world. We had a tradition of women warriors. It wasn't unknown in India. So Rudrama Devi, for example, a Kakadiya queen, used to lead her army into battle. The Cholas had women regiments. The Mauryas, the Guptas had. So it wasn't unknown. We've just forgotten it. And today, how we treat women in India today would frankly embarrass our ancestors. They would be ashamed of us. So we need to revive those memories. Because look, I think role models are very important. Role models play a role in how you behave today. So we need to revive those role models. Maybe that's why this character came to me of Toshani, a fierce warrior who's not, some caricaturish Amazonian butch woman, but she's a tough warrior and fights a woman warrior because they would be physically smaller. You can't show them fighting with a mace. That's incredulous. But with a bow and arrow, they can be devastating. So, which is what he was.
Fantastic. Yes, men can be feminists too, and Amish and me certainly are. And if there was any doubt, that bit of conversation would have cleared it. I'm going to hit some Lou Bega now. This one's I Got a Girl right here on 94.3 Radio 1. One World, your station. My name's Hrishikesh. Maroon 5 and their Harder to Breathe. Amish Tripathi's writing is gripping and unputdownable. After the Shiva trilogy, 3 books in the Ramchandra series, and 1 non-fiction book, he returns with The Legend of Suheldev, which talks about various facets of subcontinent and world culture in 11th century BC, so much of which is still so relevant today.
94.3
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
Radio 1.
Again, radical Islam versus moderate liberal Sufi Islam. Your book talks about that. And also, I had no idea that the ancient Turks were actually Buddhists who then became radical Muslims. So let's talk about both those aspects. The fact that you talk about radical Islam versus moderate liberal Sufi Islam, and the Turks actually being Buddhists.
If you see countries like Indonesia, India, vast majority of are deeply liberal. The Venkateshwara temple, for example, in the south, has many Indian Muslims coming and praying out there. The pictures which are very common, you'll find a woman in a burqa praying to Lord Vishnu. Right? Take the prasad and going. Or the Manganyar Muslims in Rajasthan who are Muslims, but they sing devotional ballads to Lord Ram. It's not uncommon. Only an Indian Muslim could have said, "Ya to masjid mein sharab peene de saki, ya aisi jagah bata jaan khuda na ho." Unfortunately, in the global world, the Indian Muslim voice is not heard that much. Voices that are heard are from countries which are fundamentalist. Unfortunately, mostly Pakistan, which is, it's an unfortunate benighted state here. It's a narco-terrorist political organization at the top, which is, the Pakistanis are the worst sufferers of the Pakistani state. So we need to speak of this a lot more so that there is a different model. Secondly, yes, the Turks were actually Buddhist till relatively late. They converted only around the 11th century in large numbers, and large numbers only by the 12th, 13th century. That's why you will find their earlier names had a lot of Buddhist influences. They started taking on more Arabic names only later. So the Turkic word for idol as well, as I explain in the book, comes from the word Buddha. Because they were Buddhists and they used to worship Gautam Buddha in an idol form. It's one of the things that we don't know. Like Khan originally is not a Islamic surname. It's only in the subcontinent that Khan is seen as a Muslim surname. Khan was originally a Turkic Mongol name. Genghis Khan was not Muslim. He was an animist.
The destruction of the Somnath.
But Genghis Khan was a Mongol, though.
Yeah.
But I think Mongols and Turks, they used to almost battle together.
Central Asia.
And the first Mongol armies, the officers were all Mongols, the soldiers were Turks, which is why the first, across the world, not just in India, across the world, the first Turkic dynasties were actually the slave dynasties, because they were slave soldiers of the Mongols who rebelled and became rulers themselves. Not just in India, across the world. Most of the first Turkic dynasties were slave dynasties.
The destruction of the Somnath temple, in a lot of ways, it destroyed India's spine at the time. Tell us about that devastating event. You do refer to it in the book. I'm not saying that the book is not fiction, but there's lots that you draw from history. So talk to me about that.
It was, and I'm a Shaivite, you know that. So for me, even writing that scene was very difficult. And beyond a point, I couldn't describe it. I just ended with him swinging the Mahmud Ghazni swinging the hammer. And yes, India has suffered this. There's a scholar called Sitaram Goyal who's written a book with evidence on hundreds and thousands of temples which were destroyed. And the Turks recorded it in their own biographies, or their own texts, like Tarikh-e-Farishte, for example. They saw it as a matter of pride. So it's not that it's hidden; it's in plain sight. Like, you can of course go and see the structures, but they recorded it as well in contemporary texts. And it's a painful period for us. It didn't just happen in India. The destruction of the classical world happened in most parts of the world. And what happened to the Greco-Roman temples? We all know they were destroyed by whom. What happened to the fire temples of the Zoroastrians in Persia? We all know what happened. The pharaonic Egypt temples, they were all destroyed. It's just that in most other countries, those original cultures, the ancient cultures, are dead, right? So there's no one to feel the pain, because their descendants, the memory has been reset. It's like a computer, right? If you wiped out the RAM and the ROM and you've started it again, there's no one to feel the pain. In India, though, we're still here. We're the only Bronze Age culture that survives still today. China is not a Bronze Age culture. It was relatively late. Emperor Qin was only only 2,500 years ago. So we are the oldest, in the only Bronze Age culture that is still a living culture. That is not a museum piece. Obviously we feel the pain. It has to be spoken of, I think. Just sweeping it under the carpet just makes it worse. The poison goes in insidious ways. Because on the one hand, like for example, if I go to Kashi Vishwanath Ji, the original Kashi Vishwanath Ji, it was destroyed by Aurangzeb. Mosque was built on top of it. All of us in Kashi, you can Google it and see the images. And the new temple that's there was built by Ahilyabai Holkar. And if I go out there, obviously I will feel pain. And I think it's good if in our history we acknowledge this pain. Because what India suffered was Nazi Germany times 300 or 500, for 6 centuries. But it must be presented in the right way. It has nothing to do with today's Indian Muslims. Today's Indian Muslims are actually descendants of Indians only, of Hindu and Buddhists. Again, do a genetic test, but you don't need to do it. Look at them. Do they look Turk to you? Do they look Arab to you? So we need to find that middle ground where we can speak the truth, but speak it without hatred.
A bit of anthropology in there, but then that's how conversations with my guest of the day, Amish, flow from theme to theme. Let's break for some Gwen Stefani and Baby Don't Lie. I'm Hrishikesh, and this is 94.3 Radio on One World, your station. Ed Sheeran's lilting Galway Girl, love it, and I'm sure you do too. Amish Tripathi's books have sold more than 5 million copies and have been translated into over 19 languages, but he rolls on and on. The latest, a book on the Indo-Turk Wars, lots of intrigue, history and philosophy in there. It's called The Legend of Suheldev, and I'm chatting with Amish about that and a whole lot more.
94.3. This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni and the Ghaznavid Turks, they've been shown as completely bloodthirsty and barbaric in your book. You also briefly mentioned about how barbaric they have been. But there's also a lot of deceit. They don't follow any kind of battle rules. What did your research tell you about that? And there are enough mentions in Suheldev whereby conventional battle norms are just not followed.
Look, the Turks were the military superpower of the world from the 11th to the 17th century. They didn't just conquer India. They destroyed much of the Arab world, which was Islamic. They destroyed what was the high point of Arab Islamic culture, which is the Abbasids. They attacked Europe. They were the ones who finally destroyed the Eastern Roman Empire, what was, at least in those days, the Greek Orthodox religion. They attacked China. They were the military superpower of the world. And if you read of them, they are in some ways a very fascinating culture. Like the Spartans were almost, and I'm saying this in jest, but the Spartans were almost pansies compared to what the Turks were. The world has never seen a warrior race like that. Timur was a Turk, for example. He killed 5% of the world's population at that time. And at a time when there were no weapons of mass destruction, no nuclear bombs, no dynamite, no machine guns. How do you kill 5% of the world's population? And you had to do it the hard way, right? Stabbing, beheading. It's not easy killing 5% of the world's population. The Mughals, we call them Mughals, but they call themselves Temuria. They were descendants of Timur. And it was a society built for war, the Turks. They did almost nothing besides war. So, for example, most other armies, most other ancient armies, when you said a 200,000 or 100,000 strong army is marching, of that 100,000 strong army, perhaps the fighters would be just 50, 60,000. The balance 40, 50,000 would be cooks, engineers, prostitutes, priests, everyone servicing the army. When the Turks said 100,000 people are marching, it means 100,000 killers are marching. No one else.
Wow.
Which is why homosexuality was so common in the Turkic army. There was actually no one else. Which is why they were so hungry for women when they conquered a territory. Which is why rape was so common. Because they hadn't seen a woman for 6 months. And then they conquer a city, and it was a society designed for war. They understood very little of administration. You'll notice most Turkic empires, most of the administrators were all Persians. They didn't want to get into administration. So that's why you'll find they were Turkic empires, but often the language, the court language would be Persian. Now, but the Persians had a glass ceiling. They wouldn't be allowed beyond a point, right? So they had disdain for the Persians because they saw them as soft and effeminate, right? At least that's what they described them as in their texts. But that entire society was built for one thing and one thing alone: war. Nothing else. Some of them were relatively decent, okay? Like Akbar was relatively decent. Some of them were brutal, boss Hitler times 1,000, beyond all limits, their brutality.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that there is a Persian prime minister in Suheldev, and you demonstrate that.
And you read many of the Persian texts, the Persians had absolute disdain for both the Arabs and the Turks because the Persians saw themselves as elegant,
aristocratic, yeah.
Classy people, and they still had memories of what they were in Zoroastrian Persia. So they saw themselves as elegant, classy people being forced to serve what they used to call locust eaters, the Turks.
Communities, history, evolution. This Amish Tripathi interview is heating up. Let me play you some Brian Adams in Open Road. Right here on 94.3 Radio 11 World, your station. My name is Hrishikesh. Kylie Minogue with Giving You Up, a former banker, now novelist, whose books have taken over the collective consciousness of the nation. I'm talking about Amish. This is such a staggeringly good chat with him.
94.3. This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
You do say openly in your forward, Amish, so I'm not being intrusive, that the last few years have been testing for you personally. You've suffered loss, grief, misery. What got you through it? And if you're not over it, then let me rephrase, what is getting you through it?
No, I mean, now it's almost like grief has become a part of life. You just learn to live with it. I think what has helped me is three things. One is work. Work gives you purpose. I was always a workaholic in any case. Now, 7 days a week just working. It gives me purpose. I think the second thing is the importance of family and a few close friends. My siblings, 3 friends. One of the things I tell people, we keep speaking of depression and various other issues, and that no one can escape suffering. No one can escape grief. What gets you through is a close circle who are with you all the time, who will die for you and you will die for them. And it's never more than 5 or 10, frankly. Your friends on your Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, they are not your friends. They're just acquaintances you're sharing pictures and posts with. Your friends, and it cannot be more than 5 or 10. Close family and your friends who will die for you, who you will, without a second thought, die for. They kind of help you through, right? These difficult phases. And the third thing that's helped is some Buddhist philosophies. Actually. Look, the dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, all have the same philosophical roots. That's why they are dharmic religions, right? Belief in karma, dharma, belief in reincarnation, which is why most dharmic people, we cremate our dead because the body is not important. It's the soul which is important. These are the things which unify us, but there are differences as well. Like faith or atheism doesn't matter that much in the dharmic religions. But one of the things that differentiates us is the lens that we have in looking at the same philosophies. So most of Hinduism, the lens that it has to look at our core philosophies, the dharmic philosophies, is this lens that you are fundamentally bliss inside. That's a concept of Satchidanand. You are bliss inside. You can't experience it because you have too much bullshit around you. So the spiritual journey strips those layers of bullshit away and you will experience the bliss.
Beautifully described.
This lens stopped working for me. And the philosophies are all there. But this lens stopped working for me because I was like, what bliss, man? What are you talking about? Do you even understand what I'm going through? So there's another lens, which is part of the monk traditions of Hinduism, which is part of Buddhism, for much of Jainism, where the philosophies are the same. They're all dharmic religions. The lens is different. The lens is not that you are bliss inside. The first step, the lens is the fundamental reality of the universe is grief, is dukh. That's the first of Lord Buddha's 4 noble truths. The fundamental reality is grief. Accept it. If you accept it, then you can move on. You suffer only if you don't accept it. So it kind of gives you that you realize सिर्फ मेरे साथ नहीं हो रहा है, सबके साथ हो रहा है. It's a reality. Who escapes it? I know it sounds defeatist. No, it's not actually. Just accepting it in some ways just sets you free. That fine, it's a part of life. अभी आगे बढ़ो. Now what do I do now? You suffer only if you resist it. This lens has actually helped.
Nice. Unfortunately, the book with your personalized letter and packaging hasn't been sent to me, but I've been seeing celebrities and other people. I don't know.
You're part of the list.
But I've been seeing celebrities and people in the public eye tweeting about it. A book with a jute cover and a seal and some threads to tie them in. I mean, talk about this unique way of sending out books to some of your special friends, your influencers, the significance of it and why you thought of this unique way of gifting it to people.
I'm lucky to have a damn good team, So it's headed by my elder brother, Anish Dada. He used to work in KPMG and hi-fi guy. So there are 2 organizations that the family has. One is a gene tech research company. My twin brother and father have started, and the other is my media company, and Dada has joined and is kind of running both. And then of course under him we have a guy with some 14-15 years of TV experience, a few others. It's a damn good team and they think deeply. I think in today's day they get, and all this, the credit for this should go to them, okay, it's not my idea, that people like deeper things. They want to get a deeper sense. I think this thing that to make this belief that many artists have, that to make something mass you have to dumb it down. I think that's bullshit. I think people like to be challenged. They like to be tickled with something intellectual. They might enjoy something brainless as well. And I love a Salman Khan movie. That doesn't mean that's the only thing that I will like. I'll read, intellectual stuff as well. So this thing, the entire thing was to kind of trigger their thinking that why has this thread, the thread actually has symbolism. The jute is completely Indian. The seal on it is symbolic. It's actually in the Brahmi script, what's written out there. It's actually symbolic of the studio that we are starting. To kind of take my books forward into movies. We started our own studio. We are working on it. So that was the aim.
Well, the writing, the marketing and the distribution all coming together perfectly for Amish Tripathi. Listen, there's so much more to cover with him, and I'm afraid it will have to be on part B of this interview. And that shall be as gripping, if not more gripping, than what you got today. Let there be no doubt. Sting and Cheb Mammy on the playlist now. It's been a while since I played you this all-time classic, Desert Rose on 94.3 Radio 1 One World, your station. I'm Hrishikesh. Michael Bublé with that fantastic song Hollywood. Part 2 of the Amish Tripathi interview now. The author returns with a book that's a bestseller from the word go. The legend of Suheldev, the king who saved India. Well, lest we forget, he's now a diplomat, Amish is.
94.3
This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
Now, this is my first conversation with you after you've become a diplomat. You're now Minister Culture at the High Commission of India in the UK and Director of the Nehru Centre. So tell me what both your roles involve and also the activities of the Nehru Centre. Some fab work happening on that front.
Yeah. So the Nehru Centre is like the Indian equivalent in the UK of what the British Council is in India. So our job is to drive the Indian cultural narrative. We have our own lovely heritage building in Mayfair, in the heart of London, just a short walk from Hyde Park. We have a auditorium out here, an art gallery. I have a lovely flat in here as well. I'm in the office. I'm in the Nehru Centre office right now. And, one of the things that, this is a government appointed role, one of the things that they get is that the Anglosphere is culturally very important. And the 3 cities which are culturally most important in the Anglosphere, which decide and influence the cultural memes, the narratives, everything, are actually London, New York and LA. Washington DC is very important politically, but culturally it's not that important. So this centre becomes hugely critical. And one of the things that I was told that we built up a good heritage, but we are speaking only to Indians. We need to start speaking to non-Indians. So that's what I started driving, out here. The programs that we had, we are moving fast in that direction. I've been here just 7-8 months now. But unfortunately, COVID happened. Some people wanted to eat bats or God knows what. But I see this as an opportunity, because we've moved all our events online. And actually we're getting a greater throughput, greater influence through that, because we can suddenly be a national brand. We are not speaking only to London. So we are getting far greater audiences. We're getting audiences from Edinburgh, from Birmingham, from Manchester. So there's a lot to be done. There is a challenge in doing this in the COVID scenario, no doubt. Practically all cultural centers have shut down, and our job is seen as non-essential. So even if restaurants lockdown has just ended, they're not going to allow, halls. It can become a COVID hotspot, right? A closed atmosphere with large numbers of people sitting together. It's not going to be allowed. Many cultural centers have decided to stay shut till the entire thing is over. But that may be 7-8 months more. Yeah. So I've decided, let's just move things online. We can't sit around waiting for things to open up.
So life in London, do you yearn for India or is it pleasant enough? How's a day in the life of Amish? Let's start with weekdays and then go into weekend schedules.
Yeah, no, and the only thing that sucks is I miss my son terribly, man. I haven't seen him in 4 months. 11 years old is the love of my life. So therefore, I just keep myself busy. It's one way to get through it. I'm normally up early, 5:30. I do my yoga, pranayam, puja, and mornings are, if I'm in my writing phase, I will write in the mornings. Then get down to emails, to events, interviews, promotions. We are doing many Nehru Centre online events. So we do that from here. If I have to go to the High Commission because lockdown has just ended, so even physical meetings have started, busy through that. And the evenings are usually for a jog. I go to Hyde Park for a jog, then come back, answer emails, and I'm normally asleep by 10:30. Basically work. I'm a boring guy.
Even the weekends, even Saturdays or Sundays.
Yeah, I work 7 days a week, man. The only thing was, part of my job out here is that I am forced to be a lot more social. I'm not a very social guy.
Yeah.
And the only interactions I would have was normally around my book launch times. And then after that, I would disappear till the next book launch. But out here, my job is that I have to be social. So pre-lockdown, yes, I used to go out, meet people almost every night. During the lockdown, fortunately, I didn't have to do that. But now I guess I'll have to do it again. It's part of the job. It's a diplomat's job. Wearing well-stitched suits and going to parties. That's part of the job.
Sounds good. A lot lot of people think your current roles are a precursor to you getting into active politics. Thought about that as yet, or planned that as yet, Amish?
One simple answer. No. Listen, I mean it genuinely. I think being a politician in India is the toughest job in the world.
It is.
It's the toughest job in the world. People compare us to other random countries. I don't want to take names, but an island country far to the east, the Prime Minister manages more people than what a district magistrate manages here in India. We are a continent more than a country.
Yeah.
A member of parliament in India manages more people than the prime ministers or presidents of 120 countries. We are in a different scale. And we as Indians, we are so rebellious. We are so difficult to manage, right? We like to think we are easy. No, we are not. We are the most difficult people to manage, because getting Indians to agree on something, my God, and politicians have to somehow make this work. So I actually have tremendous respect for politicians of all political parties, because it is not an easy job. I am not doing it. No.
Well answered there, Amish. Always quick on the uptake. Back to the music. It's Sia and Sean Paul with Cheap Thrills. I'm Hrishikesh, and you're tuned into 94.3 Radio 1 One World, your station. The supremely talented Ava Max with Salt. Amish Tripathi, the author diplomat, is my guest of the day. He's tucked away in old Blighty, London town, and missing his son a lot, like he said. But then, that's the lockdown life. More conversation.
94.3. This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
A skill you've picked up in lockdown, Amish. I mean, some people would say, I picked up a bit of cooking. I picked up, some audio software. So a skill that you picked up in lockdown, what would that be? Or, something you brushed up on?
I've improved my tech skills. I was a tech critic. We have no choice. Now we have to pick it up. And one of the things that I'd stopped, I was the lead singer of our band in I'm Calcutta. So sing both Hindi and English.
Nice.
So there's this wonderful software called Band Labs. I don't know if you've seen it. You can collaborate. You can jam with partners across space and time. You can record your thing, share it with your friend who can add in the chords later, or they can add the chords, send it in, and you can record on it. So I've started jamming again. I just did more than words. Maybe I'll just
extreme, more than words, saying I love you. Beautiful. Rock lives in Amish's
yeah. None of these fancy boy bands bloody
One Directioners will be very offended, Amish.
No, One Direction is one of those rare bands which is very good. And I have to love One Direction because my son loves One Direction. He must be to One Direction.
Talk about your childhood. I mean, 3 brothers, a sister. What was growing up in the Tripathi household like? Books exchanged, friendly fights, pillow fights, sports, music, food. What kept you guys busy?
We read a lot, man. So that was one part. Because my parents, children often don't do what their parents tell them to do.
Yeah.
They do what they see their parents doing. So my parents read a lot. So 4 of us also started reading a lot. Ma would never allow the 4 of us to fight. She was always like, this is your
circle.
Yeah, this is your circle. And if we ever had a fight with each other, and a genuine fight, not actual, just for fun, boxing and things like that. Yeah, we were very rough. We were 3 boys, and my sister, the eldest, was the roughest of us all. Actually, she was the bully of the family. So fisticuffs, all that for fun. Yeah, of course we do that, but never actual fighting where we are screaming at each other. Ma would never allow that. And if we ever did that, then we had to stand for half an hour kissing each other on the cheeks. So fuck out that because she was like, listen, you have to manage the world. The world is not easy. The 4 of you have to be like one unit. And even till today, we are strong like this.
How beautiful.
Yeah, so they wouldn't allow us to fight. We were read a lot. What else? Yeah,
what picnics? Did you guys go out for picnics? Yeah, did you?
Yeah, we weren't terribly well off. So we were. It's not that we traveled abroad or anything. It was all within India. And that too. Usually going to places where the relatives are, things like that. Middle class. And we've spent time in various parts of India, right? So I was born in Mumbai, but early years were in Odisha. So saw a lot of Odisha. Then Ashish and my twin brother and I, we were in a boarding school in Tamil Nadu, and my siblings were in a boarding school in what was UP then, is now Uttarakhand. My elder, Dada Didi. Then we all came to Mumbai. We were in school and college here, so it was good fun. Yeah, I think we had it was a wonderful thing that it was kind of like a mix of both worlds, because my parents were educated in the Hindi medium. We are deeply traditional, deeply in our scriptures and traditions, but they were very clear that because because you know how India was in those days. If your English wasn't good, you don't get good opportunities. So they were very clear that their 4 children will not suffer what they suffered. So they sent us to schools and colleges which were frankly beyond their income and social status. So the 4 of us went to boarding schools, and my parents had no savings, nothing. All their money was spent just on our education. So we went to boarding schools, we went to Cathedral School, we went to Xavier's College. I mean, in Cathedral, my friends would wear shoes that probably cost more than my father's monthly salary. But so we were kind of.
Did your dad have a government job, a diplomat, or was he in the private sector?
My father, no. He was in a private sector. He was an engineer. So we were like a strange mix of both worlds. Like the home was not strange. I think it was beautiful in a way.
Beautiful,
completely traditional and in our roots. Whereas outside we were a part of the convent school circuit. So we had an exposure to both worlds.
Wow.
And we grew up in both.
I love that. That's the highlight of this interview. That's what I call one hell of a family, the Tripathi family. The best-selling author Amish's life and times as told on the show with me. My name is Hrishikesh and this is 94.3 Radio 1. One World, your station. Let's do some Benny and Gus Dapperton now. Here's Super Lonely. Florida and Keisha with Right Round, the mega hit. Amish, the writer, and his immortal Writers Center. A bunch of collaborators have put out The Legend of Suheldev, an extraordinary story set in 11th century India with the Turks invading the subcontinent. And Amish is in a gripping interview with me on that and a whole lot more.
94.3. This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
Last couple of questions before you wrap. Secularism is an underlying theme in Suheldev, the book. If you look at 11th century India, Amish, was it actually that secular? Or can we ascribe that to fiction? Because it is a novel at the end of the day, Suheldev is.
Secular as a word has Western origins. And it is essentially came about as a reaction to the church in the West. The control of the church was reacted to by a rebellion of the secular. And that's why you will find that since there was a bit of extremism from the church side, there's a bit of extremism from the secular side as well, the secular atheists. Whereas in India, it was more pluralistic. India, the oldest Jewish community in the world is in India. We gave them refuge here when their temple was destroyed by the Romans. Perhaps the only surviving Zoroastrian community or the largest Zoroastrian community is in India, because when the Arabs attacked, they came to India, we gave them refuge here. The second oldest mosque in the world, older than the Mecca mosque actually, is in India, in Kerala. So we were deeply liberal. And I would use the word pluralistic. And the evidence is there throughout history. Our ruling emperors, for example, many of our great dynasties would have multiple religions in the same family, which is unheard of, in the last 2000 years in most other parts of the world. So by Guptas, Mauryas, or, the Vardhans, the Chodas, you could have Shaivites, you could have Vaishnavites, and they're all Hindus, but you could have Buddhists, you could have Ajivikas, all within the same family. Jains, Charvaks, that shows the openness to differences in theology. So I think the evidence is clearly there that we were very pluralistic. We were like the America of the ancient world, but we were deeply liberal. But one of the things I always say is that we weren't the California kind of liberal. We were the New York kind of. California often, it's a caricature, but liberal, but frankly a little weak. Whereas New York is liberal but tough. You don't mess with them. But they are liberal. They are open-minded to different points of view. But they're not going to, lay down on the ground for you to walk on them. That's not going to happen. So Indians were like that, our ancestors. We need to revive that spirit of liberal but tough. We need that spirit.
Very well said. That's a fabulous analogy comparing modern-day US with 11th century India. Wow. That's what makes Amish and his writing and his thoughts special. The relatability of it all. Come back for a last leg of this interview. It will be well worth it. While you wait, how about some Shaggy and Prince Midas? This one's Hope. Only on 94.3 Radio 1 One World, your station. I'm Hrishikesh. Alicia Keys and Jay-Z are in an empire state of mind. India's true literary rock star Amish Tripathi has made a dramatic return in lockdown. Post his best-selling Ramchandra series and the Shiva trilogy before that. This new one's called The Legend of Suheldev. It's more history than mythology. And here's a last leg of chat with Amish.
94.3. This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishikesh.
My last question is about Suheldev himself. He's not revered as much as he should be. You briefly mentioned at the top saying, history is written by the victors. Your book should help in that regard, disseminating information about Suheldev. But looks to me like his contribution to Bharat's unity and keeping out invaders was unprecedented. So let's sign off with that.
It was dramatic, man. We are taught in our history that Mahmud Ghazni came and almost seamlessly Muhammad Ghori came and the so-called Islamic rule began, which was actually Turkic colonial.
agree.
But we forget that Mahmud Ghazni came in the 1020s. Muhammad Ghori came in the 1190s. There's a 160-year time gap, right? The British Raj did not last for 160 years. 160 years is a damn long time. Again, what we are told about the British Raj is wrong. British Raj did not begin in 1757. They only conquered Bengal at that time, okay? The British Raj actually began when they defeated the Marathas, because the actual rulers of most of India were the Marathas. Again, they've been airbrushed out of our history till Sanjay Leela Bhansali revived interest in the Marathas with his movies. So 160 years was a very long time, and this was a period when the Turks were going around massacring much of the known world, everywhere. They didn't come back to India. King Suheldev brought us 160 years of peace. I think one of the most consequential heroes of our land, and it's not just him. Many other heroes have been ignored. Heroes and heroines have been ignored like this. I suspect it is because of excessive Delhi focus in our history books. Delhi is an important city, so I'm not belittling it, but it is not the only important region in it. And Delhi-centered empires like the Mughals, for example, have to be covered because they were massive. Delhi, Agra, Lahore, that was their center. But Lodhis were glorified zamindars. Why do you have to learn so much about them? Rajain Chola had a bigger empire than Akbar, but he's reduced to 2 lines in our history books. Non-Delhi empires have been consistently ignored in the last 70 years. The Cholas, the Hoysalas, the Marathas, the Gurjar Pratiharas, the Palas, Kashmiris, Lalitaditya, Kabira Lalita, all of them have been ignored, and because of that we have an inadequate understanding of our history. We think the fate of India was always decided by a battle in Panipat, which is not true. We think India was always a land-based agrarian civilization, which is not true. We were among the greatest trading civilizations of the known world. We'd know that if we studied other empires, right? So it's not a North Indian bias, it's a Delhi bias, because other North Indian empires have also been ignored. Gurjar Pratiharas, Palas, they've all been ignored. Raja Bhoj, for example, his empire was bigger than Akbar's. You won't know that if you haven't studied it. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, for example, he's been ignored. The Sindh empires, the Adil Shahis of Deccan. Almost everyone who didn't control Delhi has been ignored in our history books, which is, unless they were too big to be ignored. Mauryas and Guptas were too big, you couldn't ignore them. They weren't centered in Delhi, they were centered in Bihar. But they were too big, you can't ignore them. So this is a lacuna in our history. It gives us an inadequate understanding of our history. It leaves many people left out of our history. This excessive Delhi NCR focus, it leaves many people left out, right? Which is not good. Did you know of Martanda Varma, for example, one of the earliest defeats of a European power by an Asian Kerala ruler? Who has heard of them? The Ahoms. Have you noticed that all invaders to India came from the northwest? Almost none came from the northeast. The reason for that is the Pashtuns are individually very brave, but frankly they don't know how to organize themselves. So they kept losing repeatedly to invaders. So invaders would defeat, they were at the gates at the northwest. So they would lose and invaders would come in. Whereas in the northeast was protected by the Ahoms, among the longest ruling dynasties in India, 600 years. They used to defeat every single invader.
Wow.
So invaders never came from the northeast. How much do you know about the Ahoms? Assam, the Palas from Bengal, all been ignored. It's not good. The Kalingas, they've all been ignored. It's not good. We need to balance our history out.
Sure.
We need to balance.
Amish, conversations with you, including this one, are all breathtaking for the sheer vista of topics that we cover. Thank you for Suheldev, and speak soon. And be safe. Most importantly, be healthy and safe, my friend. Thank you.
Cheers. My friend, you too. Bye.
Such an interesting mind, Amish, there. Let's do a music break, courtesy Pitbull and GRL. This one's Wild Wild Love. My name is Hrishi, and you're listening to 94.3 Radio on One World, your station.